What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Early Read BetSide's college football betting show, Week 8 edition. I mean, time is just flying by here, but I am your host, Reed Wallach, at Reed Wallach on Twitter, joined today by Walt Waddell of FTN Network. Make sure to check out his work on Twitter at DubDeuces85. Walt, man, how's it going? Thank you for joining the show.
Good morning. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I had mentioned to you beforehand, I've watched a couple of your episodes and get a lot of good betting information from you guys, and your energy is very infectious. So I'm looking forward to rapping with you here about the Week 8. It's crazy how fast the season's going by. College basketball is only like 20 days away too, which is nuts.
Yeah, it's giving me the shakes just thinking about it. I mean, coming down from last weekend, it's seriously one of the craziest college football weekends of the year. We talked about it on last week's episode. We said it was going to be worth the hype, and it delivered completely. And now it makes it much easier, well, because now, I feel like college football playoff futures talk is a little boring when you're talking throughout the year because it's typically, 2-3 teams. Are they going to win? Are they not going to win? It's not as exciting. Now, though, after last week, I think it actually opens up an incredibly interesting betting conversation. So just to recap the chaos of last weekend, and we're going to give you plenty of bets throughout the next 45 minutes. But just to start with the college football playoff talk, because, of course, Tennessee gets off the schneid. They beat Alabama 52-49, an absolute thriller on Rocky Top. Tennessee, I think you could firmly say, is now in the college football playoff conversation. Alabama still firmly in the mix. Of course, Georgia from the SEC. TCU beats Oklahoma State in overtime. TCU still undefeated, in control of their own destiny. So TCU, a potential undefeated team. Another one, Clemson avoids a scare at Florida State. They win. They're still undefeated. And USC probably exits the conversation as a college football playoff contender, losing at Utah in another game that literally made me want to go outside for a walk. Like, I needed to breathe. I was sitting there freaking out. 43-42 final. I needed a second to breathe. And last one, Michigan rolls Penn State. Michigan still firmly in the mix. So a lot to unpack there. Walt, I'll start with you. Tennessee, Bama, that's really the big talking point, though. Do you think Tennessee is truly a college football playoff contender, or do you see this more as it makes it interesting, but we're still probably going to get the same end result come December?
No, I think they're definitely in the mix. There's a scenario where, Bama, because I don't believe that they'll win the SEC title, but we'll see. A two-loss Bama team gets in. So it sets up nice for the Vols, right? Their schedule, they've got a gimme against Tennessee Martin, a game against Kentucky where Will Levis he's playing, but he's hurt a bunch of times already. Missouri, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, they have that game on November 5th against Georgia. So that's really the one they got to get past. But even if they lose, I don't think that necessarily dismisses them from the conversation. And it's no guarantee that they will lose. Hendon Hooker is playing amazing football this year. Georgia's, they've had a couple of sleepwalk games where it was like, whoa, what are they doing? And I think that, the Vols are in the mix here. And I think that at worst they lose one the rest of the way. Into, potential SEC title game.
I think the sequencing of the events is very interesting because they're not going to put 3 SEC teams in.
No.
If Bama loses now, they're out. Whether it's in the SEC, because how this sets up for those that don't know, Georgia and Tennessee are in the same SEC division. They're both so only one of them can make the SEC title game. They meet in Athens, Georgia on November 5th. Alabama's in the other division, so they are going to be favored by double digits the rest of the way. They are likely still going to the SEC title game. I guess if they lose to Ole Miss, they won't make it. But I think we could agree that Alabama, whether you like them or not this year, they're still probably going to win that game.
Yeah.
That Georgia-Tennessee game is really interesting because the winner of that game is likely going to the SEC title game. If they lose to Bama, I actually think that screws the loser of the regular season game out because I think a one-loss Bama SEC title team, that team is in.
Definitely.
If they lose 2, they're out. So for Tennessee or Georgia, that game in Athens makes it very interesting. That's why, you look at the national championship market, Tennessee took a big step forward. They're still 20-1 though, because they're likely going to be maybe not 2 touchdowns, but double-digit underdogs at Georgia in a few weeks. They lose that, they kind of lose control of their own destiny. They're now hoping for some help along the way. Will a UCLA, will a TCU, will a Clemson lose to really open up that 4th spot? So I think Tennessee, this cements them as part of the conversation, but they're not a lock to get in or anything. This isn't you need to be rushing to bet Tennessee futures. I think there's still a lot that needs to be determined there. I'll move to the next one, though, because we saw USC kind of bow out of this race, and we're going to talk about UCLA and TCU later in the show. Let's talk about Clemson, though, because They go to Florida State, one of the better teams in the ACC. They close around a 4-point favorite. They win. Score line was a little bit nicer towards the end, but Clemson had control of that game. Walt, do you think Clemson, it's kind of a shoo-in that they're just going to be that fourth team now? They're going to go undefeated and run the table in the ACC? Or you're still not sold on DJ and this Clemson offense yet?
No, so see, I actually think the offense of Clemson is, as you know, they're playing under DJ like I thought they would last year. So that part of it's good. It's just that that defense isn't what we're accustomed to under a Dabo Swinney coach team. I'm actually going to talk about that game a little bit later. They're facing a very tough Syracuse team, but the Florida State game that, very easily could have lost that. Wake Forest, because of DJ's tremendous, offense and passing ability and rushing, they were able to out hustle Sam Hartman to the finish line there in overtime. And then a very tough Tennessee State team probably could have even lost that game. So they've been in some really close calls. And I think that eventually they're going to run into a spot here where, they could actually lose to Syracuse or another of their game on the schedule. So I think they're out of the teams vying for that fourth spot. They're a little susceptible to maybe, bowing out. They do have a couple of tough games left. I know Notre Dame hasn't been great. Miami hasn't been great, but both still capable of putting together a good game. Right. And I think these next, couple 2 out of 3 are going to really kind of tell us what happens with them. But initially, I think they're the one that gives me the biggest heebie-jeebies, if you will. And I don't feel comfortable betting them because I think they will drop one of these games. I think between Syracuse, Miami, Notre Dame.
Yeah, I guess Clemson still has more room to go. They're still closer to their peers, whereas like Ohio State, I think we could agree they are kind of head and shoulders above everybody else, especially in the Big Ten. So Ohio State's a shoe-in. You could pencil in probably 2 SEC teams. It's that fourth team. So I'll ask you this before we get to our best bets. Right now today, on October 18th, because this is very important, we need to know these things. But what is your top 4 predictions, Walt? What would you say the college football playoff rankings is? If you have them in order, that's great. But I'll just take just 4. Doesn't matter for order.
So it's tough. I'll kind of say, Ohio State, number 1, definitely. Yeah. I'm really sickly high on Michigan. I mean, I can't see it, 2 SEC, 2 Big Ten coming in. That would be probably too crazy. But shoot, Michigan is, probably going to run the table until they get to that Ohio State game. So probably the winner of that one ultimately ends up pushing the other out. But as it stands right now, I do think the best 4 are Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee, Georgia. As far as making the actual, playoff, it probably is Georgia, Ohio State, and then a second SEC team, whether that's Tennessee or Alabama. And then I will say Clemson, even though I think they're the most susceptible to dropping out, but I really think this Michigan team's well deserving of being in it. And the Pac-12 is definitely dead. You got to see the Pac-12 refs. It's funny, in basketball and football, the Pac-12 refs are amongst the worst in the world, I'll say. And you got to see that again, that USC game. So unfortunately, my Pac-12 is out of it, but that's where I'm at with the 4 right now.
Let me rant real quick because I had money on Utah last week. And again, I don't know the rule per se, but that pass interference call, and just to set the table for everyone that didn't see, USC goes down by 1 after Utah gets a 2-point conversion with 13 seconds left or something like that. They're trying to drive down the field. Utah pass interference intercepts a pass from Caleb Williams, starts returning it. They stop the clock. They restart the clock. There's 8 seconds left. They review the clock. They put more time back on the clock because they said an inadvertent whistle stopped the play after the interception. If somehow USC would have gotten to field goal range and lost, if you watch your read, I hate this USC team. There would have been a remote through the television. I would have absolutely blown a gasket. It would have been an absolute disaster. So thankfully, we avoided some Pac-12 referee kerfuffle there. But I will happily take my Utah win there. I still have them to win the Pac-12, so I'm pumped to talk about that. If we're talking top 4 for me, I'm going to go – it's really boring. I'm going to go most likely probably Ohio State, Georgia. I think Georgia beats Tennessee, and then they probably lose to Alabama, similar to last year. Alabama gets in, winning the SEC. And then I'm going to go Clemson. I honestly think Clemson's impressed me relative to my expectation of them this year. So I am on the – Clemson bandwagon is that 14 just for sequencing. And last year I thought this was I thought this is an anti-expansion year. Last season, I just thought there weren't that many deserving teams. This year, it's the complete opposite. I think this is the perfect year for expansion. You see so many really, really good teams grouped into the middle. Of course, you have Ohio State, Georgia, Bama, probably those 3 a little bit higher than everyone, but everyone else is awesome this year, and I'm really pumped to talk about a few of them. So great talk there, updating the college football playoff market. Let's talk some best bets for this week, right? So last week, good week for the show from yours truly. 5-2 last week, 31-24-1 against the spread on the year. So that's some good stuff. If you minus 110 each way, you're up a little bit more than 4 units on the year. So that's pretty good there. If you have any questions for games, we're going to hit on a bunch right now, but make sure to ask them. We'll get to them at the end of the show. While you're there, make sure you like and subscribe to the BetSided YouTube channel. But we will now talk our marquee matchup. UCLA traveling to Eugene to take on Oregon. Walt, I know you are a Pac-12 guy, so I'm going to get some really unique insight here from you. But UCLA, both teams off a bye, but UCLA is the undefeated team. They're catching 6 now with a total in the 70s. Both offenses have been absolutely dynamite. Walt, I'll start with you here. Kind of catch me up here because Oregon, they were in the public sphere, get blown out by Georgia week 1. Lose by 40 plus. Since then, they've hung 40 on every single game. The offense is humming with Bo Nix. Is that sustainable, or do you think that's a product of the competition? Because both teams, I think, have some suspect strength of schedules.
Yeah, and as a big, so I'm a big Washington Husky fan. I'll get that out of the way. So I'm a huge Oregon hater. I will admit that. So I do feel people will argue probably, but they come into the season hyped all the time for football. Sometimes it's deserved, sometimes it's not, but they definitely got humbled early. I will say that Bo Nix is playing out of his mind, and that really speaks to the quality of play between the SEC to the Pac-12. As a Pac-12 guy, I can admit that we have a lot weaker, teams in the conference, and you're seeing Bo Nix out there looking like the Heisman. He is very, very good throughout his career, though, at home. So that is a little bit nerve-wracking for me here. He's been really good, thrown for over 1,500 yards, only 3 interceptions to 12 touchdowns this year, rushing like just crazily, 331 yards, 8 touchdowns on the ground. So at home, though, throughout his multi-year career, 32 touchdowns, only picked off twice. When he's on the road, it's 15 touchdowns with 13 interceptions. So a lot more comfortable at home. So that's definitely a bit of a concern here with this Oregon side. They're another team for me, like Clemson. Offensively, they're definitely legit. I think that Bo Nix can continue to produce like this because the competition is lesser. But defensively, they're just not all there like a normal year Oregon team would be. Washington State scored 41 on them. BYU scored only 20, but that game was a little bit weird at first. Stanford was in the mix. They ended up bowing out late into the quarter. And then Arizona, they kind of really took control of those games in the second half. The first half, their defense was kind of, giving up all these different touchdowns, long passes. They do that against UCLA. They're definitely not going to be able to build a big lead there. So I think UCLA is not – there's some, probably some overrated thoughts here or chasing them a bit, but they're really good. Defensively, they're not as sharp either, but DTR is playing extremely well. His passing numbers are fantastic. Career high 75% completion rate this season alone, 15 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions. His interceptions number is usually pretty low, but that's really impressive, 15-2. And he's still doing it on the ground, 231-4. Oregon's defense is where it comes into play, though, for DTR. They gave up 305 to 2 and 2 touchdowns to Jaron Hall, 375 and 2 to Cam Ward, and 368 and 2 to Stetson Bennett. Now, Hall's kind of more known as a rushing guy. Stetson Bennett, he's been good, but you don't think of elite for him. Cam Ward came from Incarnate Word. So those are all decent guys, but a guy like DTR with his weapons like Jake Bobo, Zach Charbonnet, as I like to call him, can definitely do some damage here. So that +6 number looks pretty appealing, even though Oregon is much better at home.
Yeah, I see this the same way as you. I mean, total in the 70s, but I like the way you set that up. It's 2 very similar teams. 2 teams top 5 in success rate, 2 teams outside the top 90 in defensive success rate. So you're looking at back and forth here. Total in the 70s. I don't hate a look at the over, but I make this game closer to Oregon -3. I think that these 2 teams are pretty, comparable. You made a lot of good points there. It looks like a back and forth affair, and I want the team with the points. I don't want to count on Oregon to pull away and win with margin, have to win by, more than 1 touchdown. So I'm going to take the 6 also. This reeks of even if Oregon is up by 10, DTR is going right down the field and scoring. And, it's narrative-y, but Chip Kelly back home in Eugene, maybe get something cooking there. Both teams had a bye to prepare. I love what I've seen from this UCLA offense. DTR, Charbonnet, like you said, Jake Bobo, the Duke transfer has been lights out. I like UCLA here. I think they're going to be live for a win. I think that, this is more of a coin flip than anything. So catching 6, I'm going to take the Bruins with you. So there's some quick marquee matchup thoughts. Let's just pull those both up. Only one bet to know about. Me and Walt both taking UCLA catching 6. I don't
they really solidified things, not to interrupt you. They really solidified things against Utah for me. I was still kind of antsy about UCLA, but after what they did to Utah, I'm definitely a believer, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a little concerning that they are going on the road. You know, they beat Washington at home, they beat Utah at home, but I agree with you. Beating Utah, whether you think they're down or not compared to other years, Utah is to me the bar to clear in the Pac-12, and UCLA carved them. So I like this. I can't really trust Oregon's defense to win with margin against a quality team. Since they've played Georgia, they really haven't been challenged all that much, and they're still allowing points like you mentioned. So I like that we're both on the same page there. I think the other conference we need to hit on this week, just based on the matchups, is the Big 12. There's two specific matchups I want to talk about. It's the two teams that are undefeated in conference play, TCU and Kansas State, and then also Texas versus Oklahoma State. So let's start on the TCU Kansas State side, because these are the two teams I was highest on going into the year. I have a future. I split a unit on both TCU and Kansas State to win the Big 12. So this is like kind of tracking towards like my dream sit and enjoy the conference championship game. But one of these teams are going to lose their first conference game this week. TCU, of course, won a thriller last week coming back against Oklahoma State. Kansas State, meanwhile, they had a bye to prepare for the Horned Frogs and Sonny Dykes' new offense. Walt, I know you have a play on this game, so I'll start with you and then I'll give my thoughts. TCU spread around 3.5 now, coming down from Kansas State on the Kansas State side. And then the over now is sitting at 56.5. So that has also trickled down from the open.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So see, I'm the opposite on the total there, and that sometimes makes me a little nervous. I saw it was at 58.5 earlier, but I'm definitely on the over. You know, coming into it, TCU's got the 14th ranked running game. Kansas State 7th ranked. So you know, you're not thinking, oh, they're going to run a lot, ball control, not a lot of scoring opportunities. Why would I want to take the over? The pace of play for especially TCU has been just super frenetic lately. Their defense has been giving up a lot of points also because they're just marching down the field and scoring in, less than 5 minutes each time. The TCU and their opponents have had at least 59 points in 5 of their 6 games this season. So I feel pretty comfortable with that. Kansas State games have hit in 2 of their last 3 on the over as well. They're not quite as a high scoring team, but together they combined for 74.5 points. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Max Dugan, I always call him Hacksaw. If you guys are wrestling fans from the 80s and 90s, I always call him that.
Yeah, 2x4.
He's been crushing. Initially lost that job to Chandler Morris. Then Morris got hurt, tilted him right back into the mix, and he's playing so well. 1,600 passing yards, roughly 16 touchdowns to only 1 interception. So another guy who's really kind of quelled his interceptions number. And lately he's shown an ability to run the football, 261 yards and 4 touchdowns. One of those games was against Oklahoma, who everyone is having their best game against pretty much. But still, it's been impressive that he's doing that. His main running back, Kendry Miller, is an absolute dog, over 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then the big thing for me is Quentin Johnson, who came into the season with a lot of hype as, the top wide receiver in the conference. Just a complete no-show the first 3-4 games. The last 2 games, he's really taken off. 22 catches for 386 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he looks more like the WR1 that they want. Max is finding him now with that type of weapon out there. They have to account for the running game as well. And there's just a lot of balance now with this TCU offense as opposed to before QJ could really start going off. And then on the Kansas State side, it's wild to say, but Adrian Martinez has just been ridiculously good. Not necessarily as a passer, but as a rusher. Yeah. He's racked up, 546 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns. The great thing is that he's cut back on his mistakes. With Nebraska over the past few years, you can always count on him to have a big game. And then that fourth quarter, he would throw just a crippling interception or a fumble. And he hasn't really had that happen so far. He's only thrown for 4 passing touchdowns, but he does have no interceptions, which is great. He's not, turning the ball over a lot. He has cut into Deuce Vaughn's numbers, but he's just been completely unstoppable. And TCU's run defense has been pretty porous as well. They've given up some big plays. Deuce Vaughn is still looming in the backfield. He almost has 700 rushing yards, despite Amart taking all of these stats from him. And offensively, there's just going to be a lot of points scored here. TCU's a little bit better than I think they've shown defensively, but the fact that they keep pushing the pace so much and are scoring so quickly, the defense is just wearing out. So the other side is able to score a lot more. So 56.5 is great news. I think that's even better. A couple of weeks ago, there was a total between Clemson and NC State. It was sitting at like 40. I think there were some hurricane worries, but that was, to me, it was like, wow, this is a super slam. Those teams are definitely going to score that. I feel similar about this one with the 56.5. So I know a lot of your viewers probably don't know me that well, but I'm giving a very high confidence points to this one.
Yeah, fond memories of that Clemson NC State total. I had the over in that one. It said, screw the hurricane. We're riding this over out. I think you make some great points there on the over. I mean, TCU 38 or more in every single game, like you mentioned. Kansas State, I think, is going to try and slow this game down. It's tough to slow down, though, when TCU is going up and down the field, right? So I think each team getting to 28 points, spread of 3. If this, I'm curious of a TCU letdown at some point because these games are just high intensity every week. Can they keep it up? Getting Kansas State off a bye, I lean towards the over as well. Maybe not as much conviction as you, but to me, I can't take an under right now with this Kansas State, with this TCU offense. I think that Kansas State's going to need to score to win this game. I don't think they're going to be able to make this a muddy 17-14 type game. Yeah. Kansas State showed they could score on offense. I know TCU's defense is better than Oklahoma, but Kansas State has shown they could rip off explosive plays and get in the end zone. So I like the over. The other game's a little bit more confusing to me, and Oklahoma State's now catching 6.5. Hand up, made a really, I guess, silly bet. I bet Oklahoma State plus 3.5 because I thought Oklahoma State maybe should have been like pick in this game or maybe -1 in this game. Plus 6, sorry. But I just can't get to this number. I can't figure out what we're supposed to do with Texas, who they blow out Oklahoma 49-0. But we saw last week the drop-off for Oklahoma's offense, winning 49-0 to me against the Sooners team with their backup quarterback is just not as impressive. Then they play Iowa State, and they struggled. They should have lost that game. I watched the end. Iowa State drops a touchdown. They fumble with 2 minutes to go, about to tie it. So I don't really know how we rate Quinn Ewers. Yes, this Texas team is really good, but this was an Oklahoma State team that was catching 5 in Fort Worth last week against that TCU team and lost in overtime. I understand there's Spencer Sanders, shoulder injury worries, but, maybe I'll put on my clown mask again and I'll bet against it. But you're giving me a still quality Oklahoma State team, maybe not college football playoff good, but still a good team, a contender in the Big 12. This is still a big game for them. I just don't trust Texas going on the road. Still need to prove it to me. I don't really know how to get a clean rating on Texas because of all the Quinn Ewers injuries. They've lost some games. They haven't covered. So I think it's all weird. Walt, do you have any sort of, finger on the pulse of Texas right now? Because to me, this line, it's one-way traffic towards Texas. I have to play back against this. This is just too wide.
Yeah, and that's, last week I was talking to lots of people. I was like, this Iowa State, like plus 15, plus 16, whatever book you could get it at. And I was like, this is way too high. I know Texas looked fantastic, but it was against Oklahoma. Again, everybody's lighting Oklahoma up. Iowa State's defense is a lot better. They can compete and keep this close. Like that 15 was way too high. This feels, I'm not nearly as excited about it, but I don't ever trust Texas really. Every time we do over the past couple of seasons, I know it's a new year, new team, whatever. Every time you start to trust them or you put any money on them, they break your heart. And it's been that way for a couple of years now. So I think that Spencer Sanders, who is another guy like Amart, has had some mistake prone stuff in the past, has cleaned that up. I think there's a lot to do about nothing with the rumors of his shoulder stuff and not playing. That was just kind of silly talk. But they're a really strong team. He's got, multiple weapons and Texas defensively, looking at it, they shut Oklahoma out without Gabriel, but they're giving up, 20 plus points pretty consistently. And this Oklahoma State team can score. So I'm with you on the other side there. And I just can't put any money on Texas. And anytime there's this large spread on them, I will definitely consider the other end.
Yeah, so there's some Big 12 talk. Again, big week. It feels like every week these Big 12 teams are just going in absolute heavyweight battles. So Walt's taking the over 56.5 in TCU, Kansas State. I am taking Oklahoma State plus 6 against Texas at home. Listen, maybe Spencer Sanders doesn't play, but that's still a big spread to cover. Oklahoma State, to me, maybe not an elite team, but I think they're still a quality club. So I think they could cover at home and also be live for an upset. So now let's talk some underdogs. I think my entire card is just underdog. So this will be a special underdog segment, but you were talking about another marquee matchup that I'm happy we are talking about because it deserves shine. 2 undefeated clubs, team I've been backing heavily this entire season. Syracuse football, the team from Western New York, they're traveling to Clemson, catching nearly 2 touchdowns. Walt, give me the handicap here.
Yeah, so this is the real Orange Bowl, right? Between two orange teams. Last 2 unbeaten teams in the ACC. Q's probably, much more of a bigger surprise, I think. Coming into it, they're 5-1 against the spread. Defensively, they've held their last 2 opponents to a combined 9 points. Granted, that was against Wagner and an NC State team without Devin Leary, so take that with a grain of salt. But they're definitely playing some really, really good football. The maturation of Garrett Schrader as a passer and not just a rusher this season has made them completely, dominant on offense at times. They're not as one-dimensional. WR1, Oronde Gadsden's dad's name might sound familiar to some of you. He's emerged as a big part of their success. He's got 31 catches for over 500 yards, 5 touchdowns. Teams in the past would be able to kind of just box up and try to stop Sean Tucker, their stud running back, which he still is a stud. But that, like I said, the emergence of that passing game has really kind of stuck out to me and made Syracuse a much more efficient offense. Clemson, like I said, I feel like of that fourth team going into the playoff, they're the most susceptible to possibly losing. And this is one game that I think could potentially lose. I know they're at home. The cover to me, I think is close. Last year, I believe it was 17-14. Clemson won by 3. Clemson does have a 37 straight game winning streak at home. They're 8-1 against Syracuse under Dabo Swinney. So, the win for Syracuse probably asking for a lot, but the cover not nearly as much. And again, the last, 2 of the last 3 for Clemson that really could have gone either way for them to lose. Offensively, things are cooking for them, but it's just that defense that hasn't been as solid. Syracuse's defense has been much more consistent, although they've gotten to face some teams without, some of their starters like Leary, banged up Louisville team. There's just been, some games where they've kind of had the benefit. And then as far as Clemson's defense goes, they gave up over 200 rushing yards last week. A couple of weeks ago, they gave up 300 plus passing yards to the almost machine like Sam Hartman. He does it every week. So I think there's just going to be plenty of opportunities for Syracuse to keep this within, 7 to 10 points. Not necessarily going to stick my neck out and say, yeah, money line this, they're going to win. But I think that covering 14 points is definitely, or them just, staying within the 14 is going to be definitely doable. And that just has to do with like I said, Schrader being a better passer this season. And Clemson, they're due a letdown. I don't want to say due. I hate using that term. It's kind of whatever, but they're just a letdown has to be coming for them. I know sounds like you're pretty high on them, but it's kind of where my head's at with them.
Yeah, offensive coordinator Robert and I from Virginia has really upgraded this offense to a really high level. So I can't hate it there. I don't know if I'm going to be on it. Just I want to see if I can get that 14 with Syracuse. But listen, Syracuse always plays Clemson tough for some reason. It's one of those matchups that Dino Babers always has the orange up for. So listen, the team from Western New York, maybe they'll make that college football playoff conversation we were talking about earlier. Mine, you were going down south. I'm going out west. I'm going to take Boise State plus 3.5. I think Boise State's going to win this game outright. They hit rock bottom a few weeks ago, and then they cleaned house. Hank Bachmeier, went the transfer portal. They fired their offensive coordinator. They brought back in Dirk Cutter, former head coach in the NFL, former Boise head coach. He's back. And Taylor Green has kind of upgraded this offense to a high level. They've scored 30-plus in their last 2 games against San Diego State and Fresno State. Now they get a bye to prepare for Air Force, and that's only going to help this already elite defense. Boise State got off to a slow start because their offense, not because of their defense. The team is 5th in success rate, top 20 against the run. They're allowing less than 3 yards a carry. What do we know about Air Force? Triple option. All they do is run. So I like Boise. They get the bye to prepare. And I bet Air Force last week. I laid the 9.5 against UNLV, and they smoked UNLV 42-7. It was an absolute romp. But it was a little fraudulent. UNLV drove the first drive of the game, fumbled. Air Force comes back and scores. Then they fumble the ensuing kickoff. It's 14-0 before you know it, so it's off to the races. So I think Air Force being a little overrated. They've lost to Utah State and Wyoming as big favorites before. This game a little bit closer, but I think Boise's the better team. I'm going to take the points. I think they win this game outright. I know some 3.5s are gone. 3 minus 110, certainly good with me. That'd be the last buy point. But yeah, give me Boise off the bye. This is a great setup. I think Boise State is a play-on team going forward until the market catches up to them. Walt, any thoughts there before we move on to our late night action, which I guess is like
they were well past the Hank Bachmeier era. I know they had been staying loyal to him, but everyone, and I'm pretty DFS oriented on some of my stuff, and I've been kind of chomping at the bit for Taylor Green to get in there, and that week 1 game he was so phenomenal, and now that they've turned the ball over to him, and Bachmeier's kind of set sail, that they're playing a lot better. So I have to like that bet for sure, because under him they're just so much more explosive. The running game is much better. It's opening up the passing lanes. Just a much better product on the field with Green out there.
For sure. So let's bring up that Underdog recap graphic. Walt, he's taking the orange Syracuse plus 13.5 against Clemson. And then I am taking Boise State plus 3.5 against Air Force. If you want to take plus 3 minus 110, that's totally cool also. That's a buy for me. So you are a West Coast guy. I guess this is like late night for me. Both games are starting, I believe, after 10 o'clock Eastern. So our Under the Lights segment, I am obviously, again, looking at an underdog, but you're looking at a favorite. So let me hear it, Walt. What is your late night play to keep people interested late?
Yeah, I wasn't sure the time zones, which one you guys were going to consider late. So I looked at this one, and I've been trying to pick on Nevada a little bit. But yeah, SDSU -7 versus Nevada. It's been a really bad down year for Mountain West football. There's just, UNLV was cooking for a while, then they've got the injuries, at quarterback, and they're kind of falling off, and SDSU has kind of been up and down, but Nevada, they've just been bad. They obviously Norvell is off to Colorado State. Many people transferred. They still have Toa, but they don't have a lot going on for them. They just gave up 31 points to Hawaii offense that has really struggled throughout the season. They have no wins against the spread. Speaking of Nevada, defensively, they're giving up almost 400 yards of total offense, 185 of that on the ground. So you're looking for, when you're going against Nevada, a marquee running back. Hawaii's Dedrick Parson, a guy I love for DFS. He rushed for 136 and 3 last week. Colorado State's Avery Amaro rushed for 168 2 weeks ago. And then speaking of Air Force, Brad Roberts, who gets a ton of carries for them, he rushed for 123 and 3. And then Iowa Caleb Johnson rushed for 103 and 2. The Aztecs do have an RB1 that is solid in Jordan Bird. He's rushed for over 300 yards this year. Pretty much can expect a heavy diet of him throughout. I think, the Aztecs kind of favor that ball control style offense themselves. They don't want to have, the Burmeister throwing too much. And once they get a little bit of a lead, they'll just run the clock out and kind of, dare Nevada to even score, 7 to 10 points. So I think we're looking at a pretty safe Aztecs win here by 10 to 14 points. And I'm going to be riding this one pretty high.
Good. Love that. Great stuff on Nevada's rush defense. But I'm going to go, I guess this is even grosser. So I'm going to take Cal plus 7.5 against Washington at home. So let me just backtrack here. Last week, I took Colorado catching 2 touchdowns at home against Cal. I bet them on the money line plus 500. I said, you do not want to bet Justin Wilcox as a favorite. He is terrible as a favorite. I don't have the number up in front of me anymore, but it's almost the complete opposite when he's an underdog. 22-9-1 against the spread as an underdog. When it's a touchdown or more, 16-3 against the number. I mean, this is ridiculous. He's awful as a favorite, and he's terrible as an underdog. It is the perfect swing here. And now nobody's going to want Cal after they lose to Colorado, a team that was winless, fired their coach. But I'm going to take him catching over a touchdown against Washington. The team has struggled on the road this season. They got smoked by UCLA. They got smoked by Arizona State, who also is terrible, who had their backup quarterback in that game. I believe they allowed 45 points in that game.
Embarrassing.
Yeah, Al, this is a team that plays slow. They like to stick to teams. Maybe Jack Plummer could get the passing game going against a really bad Washington secondary. Another one where the back door is probably going to be open late. So, yeah, give me Wilcox in his preferred spot as an underdog. I think this is another one. Cal is live to win this game late. I might end up with a little money line dart on this one as well. You are a Husky guy, so let me hear it. Am I wrong here?
No, you're absolutely right. I have to, I'm a homer for the Huskies, but I can admit when we're terrible on defense right now, and it's tough because there's actually pros on this defense, but there's a real issue with them tackling the football, and defensively in the game of football, you have to be able to tackle and stop people, and they're not doing that. It was very glaring against Arizona State, but yes, when they're at home, they're a completely different team. That's something I noted on Twitter a couple last week during the game. Michael Penix is just, he's phenomenal at home, and he's still pretty good on the road, but defensively they fall apart. The offense isn't as solid. Roma Duns is my guy at wide receiver. He's been crushing it. But yeah, the fact that they can't tackle, receivers are multiple receivers are getting, 85 plus receiving yards against them. The rush defense hasn't been good. I was all over Jaden Knott last week for Cal, his prop, but he did terrible against Colorado, which is probably why they lost. But I think he has a nice bounce back week against us. And yeah, it wouldn't shock me if they win. I don't think they will, but yeah, it'll be like a 3-point game late. So you're going to be live for sure.
Like Cal driving late.
Yeah.
Washington needs to find a stop late, in at the 40 or something.
And I'll be pacing a hole in my floor, definitely.
Well, don't worry. I'll be pacing in my apartment at 2:30 in the morning. At least it'll be a regular, normal hour for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was great. So there's our under the lights. Let's pull up that recap graphic. I know we each have a few more bets we want to get to here, but San Diego State -7 is Walt's late night play against Nevada. And then I'm taking Cal plus 7.5 against Washington. So there's all our segments. If you have a question, start filling them in. We will get to them in just a few minutes. I have 3 more bets. Ironically, they are all underdog bets. So I'm just going to go really quick here, Walt. And then if you have any other ones, feel free. Anything you want to plug, player props, whatever you want to do, feel free. This is kind of open time where you could do whatever you want. But I'll start Friday night, UAB plus 2.5. Another game, I think UAB is going to win this game outright. Western Kentucky, they have wins over Austin Peay, Hawaii, FIU, and Middle Tennessee. Maybe one of those teams, Middle Tennessee, is not a bottom 30 team in the entire country. One of them is an FCS team. UAB, on the other hand, they've scored 34 or more in all their wins. 2 losses, kind of tough. A lot of fumbles against Liberty, and then they lost a tough one to Rice. I love this UAB team. I think they're a play-on team in the Conference USA moving forward. Secondary should slow down the Western Kentucky air raid. They are 11th in EPA per pass this season, 14th in completion percentage allowed, and 34th in explosive pass defense. I think UAB runs wild in this one. I think they win this game outright. So plus 2.5, a play for me on UAB. Next, Navy. I think this is plus 3 now, but plus 3 is still good. Fading Houston. I don't trust them. Like similar to Boise State, like they got to buy to prepare for the triple option, but I'm not buying it with Houston. Second most penalties per game in the entire country. Daniel Holgerson has completely lost the script with this team. Navy, super disciplined. You know what you're getting with them. They are actually the second least penalized team in the country, just over 3 per game. So I don't trust this Houston team going on the road, laying points. And just for reference, Navy, they seem to beat the same teams over and over again. It's kind of a trend. I know that players change sometimes, but year over year, it's not that bad. Last year, Houston closed a 20-point home favorite against Navy, and they only won by 8. So I know that's not like the only reason to make a bet, but I'm just saying Navy has shown a propensity to stick close to Houston in the Dana Holgerson era. So I'll take Navy at a field goal or more. They're playing really good football lately. The offense coming alive. And last one, UTEP plus 4 at home against FAU. Don't trust FAU as a favorite against anybody. UTEP had a bye to prepare for this one. They're top 30 nationally in tackles for loss. And if you look last week, FAU beat Rice by 3 at home. They had the lowest post-game win expectancy for a winning team last week per Bill Connolly of ESPN, 15% win expectancy. So they probably should have lost if they lose that game to Rice. Are they favored in this game? I like UTEP with the extra prep. So plus 4, another game. So just to recap right there, UTEP plus 4, Navy plus 3, UAB plus 2.5. All Underdog early read episode for me. Walt, do you have any other bets you'd like to share?
Yeah, I love that UAB call. I actually looked at that for a minute, but I'm glad I didn't. But their running game is phenomenal, so I'm with you on that. I like that one a lot. So I have 2. The prop I do like to hit the prop market, but it doesn't look like there's too much up. So I'll kind of have that up on Twitter and stuff later this week if anyone's interested. But I do have 2 that I'm really looking at. Memphis plus 7 versus Tulane. Memphis has lost back-to-back heartbreakers, right? The multiple overtime game against ECU just lost 47-45. And late to that Houston team that is very susceptible to just throwing games away, 33-32. So really close losses. Tulane, I know they've been very tough. They actually own wins over Houston and Kansas State. But I think that this Memphis offense, it's got a lot of juice on the running side. They've got plenty of receivers. Tulane's just, they have the firepower with Tyjae Spears to kind of keep up with Memphis. But I think that this will be one that ends up going down to the wire. And whether Memphis ultimately wins or not doesn't really matter too much. I just think it'll be like a 3 to 6 point game. So give me Memphis with that 7 just because of the way that they've been playing right now. And then Oregon State, we just talked about Colorado. Oregon State's a 24-point home favorite against Colorado. Colorado's just terrible. I was all over Jay Knott last week. The reason why is because they give up over 250 yards on the ground. So I typically like to target the RB props against them. They don't have a number for that just yet, but Oregon State does have a kid by the name of Damian Martinez. Broke out last week against the Cougars, rushed for 111 yards. He's been kind of trending towards taking the carries away from Deshaun Fenwick and Griffin. So that finally happened. If he gets like 20 to 25 carries, he will rush for 200 plus yards against this Colorado team. And I know 24 is a lot, but I don't think the Buffaloes will probably even be able to score, 6 to 7 points against them. The Beavers defense is a lot better than people realize. So I am going to take them as a big favorite, minus 24, and then Memphis at plus 7 there against Tulane.
Yeah, Memphis is on my list as games I would kind of want to dive into. I'm not like rushing to bet that one. I had ECU last week laying the 3, got a good number there, and they could not close it out. But yeah, I lean towards the Memphis side. I'm not really sold on Tulane as winning with margin. Another team, I faded Tulane last week with South Florida. Kind of thought I was going to get there. Bohannon gets hurt, kind of goes off the rails. But yeah, I will be sure to dive into that one a little bit more. All my bets while we're here, a little PSA. All my bets the rest of the week are on my bet stamp at RW33. Just download the app. You can find all my bets there. There will be plenty plenty more. So let's get to some questions here, Walt, before we get out of here. Someone asked about the Oregon State game, so happy we hit that one. We'll start with South Carolina at home against Texas A&M. To me, it's South Carolina or pass. I'm a little nervous with Texas A&M's defense. Can they just, get Spencer Rattler running for his life every which way? I'm a little nervous about South Carolina off. They beat Kentucky, but that was with Kentucky's backup quarterback. Then they had a bye, so maybe they are trending up. But I don't know. I'm not rushing to lay points with Texas A&M. It would be South Carolina or pass, but I'm probably going to be more on the pass side for this. Do you have any opinion here?
Yeah, I would probably just leave it alone as well. The South Carolina rush defense is really bad. So if A&M with Devin Achane can theoretically just run the football repeatedly, but I have a lot of trust with them because they've been in good matchups before where he got kind of shut down and they couldn't generate points. So it's not one that I like at all, actually. But I'm with you. I would if I had to take something, I'd probably go SC there, but I don't like it.
Yeah, and then last one we'll get to, Kansas upsetting Baylor. So interesting setup for this game. Blake Shapen left the Thursday night game against West Virginia. Baylor's quarterback, he was slinging it. He left with a concussion. I believe it was a concussion. Left with an injury. Didn't finish the game. Kansas, of course, we know that they're likely on to Jason Bean for the foreseeable future. They were able to move the ball in Oklahoma. We just kind of trashed Oklahoma for the past 45 minutes here. But they were able to move the ball, so can Kansas stay within, I want to say it's like 7 now. I haven't looked at an updated market here, but, I kind of think Baylor's defense gets right. But if it's not Blake Shapen, there was a significant downgrade in quarterback for Baylor when Shapen went out. So if Shapen's out, I actually lean towards Kansas. I think they could actually get an upset here just because Baylor's season might be kind of slowly unraveling. But if Shapen's in, I think Baylor team total over is probably a good look there. Their offense is starting to break out a little bit. Any thoughts here, Walt?
Yeah, I mean, Shapen, he's fantastic. He chased, speaking of Bohannon, he chased him out of town there. And their backup, they use is Kieran Drones, and he did not look very good. And it's going to be a tough situation. While Kansas has a capable backup they can lean on in Jason Bean that's already shown out in 2 straight games. So, that's an injury-related news there that we'll have to track and then, hit it before books adjust. But I would probably lean Kansas there depending on that Shapen news.
Yeah, I'm doing like the quickest of Twitter searches just for the sake of like the live audience. But it looks like Shapen is gonna be okay to play. They're still in concussion protocol, so maybe they're not. But I think the best way to look is if Shapen's in, you're probably gonna see the line react really quickly. They're laying over a touchdown right now. I think forget the spread, just go for the team total over on Baylor. That would be my best look because that's probably going to update a little bit slower based on the injury news, but you need Shapen, and that kind of defines the whole bet. So not sure I believe in Kansas pulling the upset, Jerry, but Shapen's out. Maybe that's a little live, but thank you everyone that chimed in the comments, everyone that tuned in live. Let's get that recap graphic up and we will finish out the show. So again, Walt's best bets, UCLA +6 against Oregon, the TCU Kansas State over 56.5, Syracuse +13.5 against Clemson, and San Diego State -7 against Nevada. And then for myself, I'm also on UCLA +6 against Oregon, Oklahoma State +6 against Texas, Boise State +3.5 against Air Force, and Cal +7.5 against Washington. A dog card for me there for week 8. So there's our show. Walt, thank you so much for coming on. Make sure you check out his stuff at FTN Network and his Twitter page at DUB Deuces DEUCES 85. Big shout out to Joanne Woodcock behind the scenes. She pulls all the strings. She's the best in the business. You follow me on Twitter at Reed Wallach, and check out my bet stamp at RW33. Until then, until week 9, everybody have a winning week, and we will see you next Tuesday.